helping development align itself better with the business side?
Well, one of the things is, as you said, I do emerging technology, so I have a technology group, and I have a services group that goes out very early, as we call it, kind of cookie dough form. But there's no safety net. So as they do the technology, they go right in front of customers, and they get to hear the good and the bad. And customers are great, because if we didn't hit the mark, they know it's a communication. They didn't explain it to us well, we didn't understand it well, which is more likely, right? And we continue through that. But having continuous development so I can come back to them quickly and get in front of them as I learn more about it is a critical factor. If I'm 6 months out and I come back and say, I think I understand it now, they might look at me and say, what did we talk about? I don't know, I'm lost. And so I think this is the part of it's not, my team turns things around in weeks. We have to do that. And I think that's going to be going forward, as Dave was talking about, not only listening to the customer story, but then turning it into a value proposition they can evaluate and talk in dialogue back and says, you're getting close, or we still aren't hitting it right.
Yeah, I think one of the advancements is getting, let's say, the quote-unquote code into the hands of the business user, the business leader, let's say. And, maybe some of you are a little scared with that proposition, but when you look at the advent of things like rules technologies, I think it's a very nice way to set up a relationship between IT and business, where the business folks, in a language of business, express behavior in a way that's natural for business, but also be managed in a fairly rigorous way from a development perspective, so that the business leader could alter that logic as time goes on without having IT square in the middle. So I think the advent of rules and business rules have come a long way and have taken this notion of joining business and IT closer together. When we talk about agility, I think getting business folks to program is a very high form of agility.
But the stories from the business objective leading to the results, the iterative nature, the design of the applications. One thing that we're going to increasingly see, we are seeing, is the complexity of the systems and how critical it will be to look at the system as loosely coupled elements. How are we going to integrate across these loosely coupled elements? How are we going to use techniques like linked data so that we're sharing information, we're federating capabilities, so we're not passing data all around, which, the converse, if you start passing a lot of information around, much more point-to-point connections, it creates so much complexity in these large systems that they start collapsing on themselves. So that loose coupling, that federation, that linked data technique, integrate these systems to actually get to the experiences that we need to deliver to have.
Yes, I think that's something that we underestimate. That there's a huge amount of business value in flexibility. And many of the systems that we've put together have actually been very rigid, that when the business moves on and has slightly different needs, we have a lot of difficulty in recombining elements. And I do believe that these kind of internet technologies, the linked data stuff, the OSLC kind of technologies that we're using both in Tivoli and Rational, to integrate our tools, they show the power of being able to break things into more loosely coupled components that can then be recombined as things evolve. I actually think that agile techniques are giving us at least 2 new tools for sort of business alignment. One is the basic idea of agile is that you get results delivered in front of the business much more quickly. So you can begin to see the business, business people can see results immediately rather than waiting 6 months or a year or something like that for a big bang at the end. And I think that helps align with business value. The other thing that I think Agile is doing, one encouraging trend that I see, is that Agile encourages people to break a problem up into a number of smaller business stories or user stories. And the important thing about user stories is that they're small enough to be delivered in an iteration, but they're big enough to have business value. And I'm seeing more and more organizations that are actually being very conscious about assigning a business value to every story and then using those estimates of business value to do prioritization. I think where we still have more progress to make is being able to actually track the costs of delivering a particular story and then being able to check those estimates of business value against the true result of business value. So I think that this is something that we'll see as a trend, is people being more conscious about how they measure the actual benefits of what they're doing.
I thought that was very insightful yesterday, the conversation that Christoph was having with Amir on measurements. The measurements at each step of the process through the life cycle. And that the measurements can often be viewed as putting a burden, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot more meetings into the overall process. But in fact, when the stories are understood, the outcomes are understood, it's broken down incrementally, and there are measurements at each step, you see how we're achieving it. It actually created some trust, and it created a lot less meetings, a lot more productive environment.
Yeah, I think it's like buying a car. Would you go buy a car and not know the price of it when you walked in? I think as we go forward, we can instrument our systems much better. When the business says, I think this might have X amount of value, they're not willing to spend more than that. They have to spend, what's the profit margin on this? And how can you measure that, and what are the trade-offs with that? So they get to understand exactly what system they're going to be paying for, what the payback is on that up front before they get too far down the line.
I think there's a general theme around that of getting business people more involved in design, and frankly making design more transparent and more visible. I think there are too many projects where business people have expressed the need and the idea at a high level, but there isn't enough concrete expression of what really is the design, what is it that we're trying to have come out of this. And so design and design language, I think, is something that there's an opportunity to invest more and be more successful.